Namaste.
Namaste.
Welcome to Sri Sandeep Balakrishna, the author of Invaders and Infidels. Sandeep is a veteran writer, author, editor, speaker, and independent researcher with about 20 years of writing on Indian history, culture, literature, and temples. That's really interesting to see that he's authored more than 900 articles and essays. And that's a big number. You could make volumes out of it. He's associated with a number of institutions and writes in Kannada and in English. So he's like a Savya Sachin, somebody who can handle with two hands, like that he can handle with two tongues. Tipu Sultan, the Tyrant of Mysore. I could see the impact of this one day when I had to review a book where Tipu Sultan was treated in a very generous manner. So there was a gentleman from the crowd. He got up and accused me of, supporting Tipu Sultan, an elderly person. I said, no, that is the view of the author. I'm just kind of reviewing. I fully agree to that because Coimbatore underwent a lot of difficulties during the time of Tipu Sultan. It was renamed as Salamabad, and Dindigul was renamed as Daulatabad. And then, of course, Madurai Sultanate, a concise history. Not many people are aware that there was a Sultanate in Madurai. Thank you. I think I should get that book and read. I'm very eager to read that. And then, of course, 70 years of secularism, which is nothing but minority communalism, according to me. And unpopular essays on the unofficial political religion of India. And then, of course, the great Avarna. I have great, all of us, why only me, have the greatest regard and respect for Sri S.L. Bhairappa. And we salute him and salute you for having taken up that work. I've seen that work, Avarna, read it here and there, but now I think I should read it fully after having known you and maybe get an opportunity to meet the great man one day and seek his blessings and whatever from him. Dharma Dispatch, very good words. An online journal dedicated to Indian civilization and a contributor editor at Preksha Journal. So many things with Sandeep. It's amazing. A life full of action. And it must be exciting to be Sandeep Balakrishna and must be really exciting to know him, to be with him and to look at his works. So we make a beginning with Filter Coffee with Rajesh Govindarajulu, that is myself with Sandeep Balakrishna. I was really happy to read this book. And this is book number 1. And I'm sure more books are in the offing. Terrible is the word that I always use while talking about the era between 1192 and 1526. The slave dynasty, the Said dynasty, the Lodi dynasty, the Khalji dynasty, and whoever, and including the terrible Balban, about whom Sandeep has written in detail. And of course, the first part of the book relates to, the book is more interesting because all of us are aware of the 5 dynasties and their rule in India and their evil activities in India, how they destroyed Bengal and how they tried to destroy Gujarat but were not very successful. But here, the invasion of Sindh, the capture of what is today's Pakistan, the conversion of the people of whoever were living in Afghanistan, the Afghanistan of today, and whatever else that they did to all those regions, and how from Lahore to wherever and to all other places, the evil designs and the terrible activities, the pogroms that all these invaders had committed. very shocking. I found it difficult to read the book, not because that it is, the book is written beautifully well, but our mind does not permit us to read something which is talking about the gruesome approach of somebody. And that requires a lot of courage on the part of Sandeep to first do a study and to chronicle. Because to come out with the truth today, people will call Sandeep communal, and for having interacted with me, I will also be called communal. That's the kind of narrative that is going on. And who's the infidel? We are the infidels. And who are the invaders? They are the invaders. Invaders who came from Arabia and invaders who came from Central Asia. It was a terrible invasion and a terrible series of invasions. When we look at the works of people like R.C. Majumdar, was he not the person who was first given the opportunity to do a study and a book, and then the book never came out when we were newly independent? Great historian. And then we are also looking at Muhammad bin Qasim. What is really interesting is all these cruel people, though it appears that they seem to have won, but all of them had a miserable end. Muhammad bin Qasim, Muhammad of Ghazni, Muhammad of Gori, and everybody else. I didn't know that Aibat meant little finger until I went through this book. And also the Ismaili Shia Karmatians and the destruction of the Aditya Temple in Multan, which was known as Molastan. And Peshawar was also an important city. Always I get people criticizing the RSS simply because of their concept of the Akhand Bharat. And they want to capture Afghanistan, they want to capture Pakistan, all of Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and make it into one big country. But if we go through this book by Mr. Sandeep Balakrishna, you will agree that it was one Akhand Bharat at one point of time. In the Vishnu Purana, it says, Uttaram tat samudrascha himadraschaiva dakshinanam varsham tat bharatam nama bharata yati santati. Uttaram tat samudrascha, from the north to the sea. Himadraschaiva dakshinanam, from the Himalayas to the south. Varsham tat bharatam nama. The country is called as India or Bharat, where the descendants of Bharata live. What a beautiful country the Pakistan must have been in its earlier incarnation or its earlier form. After going through this book, I was just, on one of the nights when I was holding the book on my chest and relaxing while I was reading this book, I was, thanks to the depth of Sandeep's narration, I could imagine the old Multan, I could imagine the old Kandahar, I could imagine the old Peshawar, I could imagine the old Takshila or Takshashila or Vikramshila and the burning of Nalanda, that it took so many days to burn, or perhaps a couple of weeks. How many years that it must have taken to construct that knowledge, that information. And these people are portrayed, the people who burnt all these places are portrayed as enlightened souls. There must have been nothing enlightening in them. They just kept destroying in the name of religion. And finally, while taking the name of religion, I observed one thing, that Balban thinks that his tribe and he were the blessed ones by the Lord Almighty, and that he was blessed to take over the kingdom and rule. One guy defeated the other in terms of brutality. Butchering, chopping, cutting, raping, getting besotted with good-looking young men and boys, taking away 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people as slaves. And and why did not the Indian rulers stand up? Why was there no unity? When Prithviraj Chauhan here, I stand corrected with the right surname Chamana. When he was killed, Jaichand was keeping quiet and he was waiting to get butchered. When there was a lack of unity, one after the other, the rulers were getting destroyed. Of course, we get to learn of Nike Devi, get to learn of the evils that took place at Ajmer. There's a lot of information which I must definitely say, Mr. Sandeep, is not found properly in the history books. If we take the history books connected with Prithviraj and the Sultanate of Delhi, Muhammad bin Qasim's invasion of Sindh in 1713, his capture of Sindh, there are several factual errors. At least while I was in school, I'm in my early 50s. Whatever that I read, unless they've corrected it, I hope they have. But when I see this, the important role played by Ajmer, and you look at some of the old dynasties, the old locations. Last week we just did the Rivers of the Rigveda by Jijit Nadumari Ravi. I can see the continuity of some of the names that Mr. Sandeep has used here and there. The old names are coming back here. What a tragedy. And how I wish we had understood the truth about all these people. And everybody has suffered. So many Jains put to death. The Jain Acharya Asadara writes that when the Sapadalaksha region was conquered by Mahmud of Gaur, he fled from his native country and migrated to the safe haven of Malwa because he was scared of being forcibly converted and his family molested by marauding armies. Hindus in the mainland India got a new identity which continued till the collapse of the Mughal Empire. Zimmi or Dimmi. Amir Khusro Dehalvi delineates the full pious import. The whole country, by means of the sword of our holy warriors, has become like a forest denuded of its thorns by fire. Islam is triumphant, idolatry is subdued. Had not the law granted exemption from death by the non-payment of poll tax, the very name of Hind, root and branch would have been extinguished. Emphasis added. Sanskrit College became a mosque in Ajmer. A torrent of blood flowed on the battle, but the badly outnumbered Hindu governor had to eventually surrender and placed his head upon the line of slavery. Then finally, death by 22 cuts. This is what happened to this evil man called Muhammad of Ghori. One more line. India's ancient civilization. The seeds were sown for the concentration of absolute despotic political power that had the unstinted backing of an Islamic clergy, which in turn derived its authority from scripture. This was a political phenomenon India had never witnessed before, and which would irreversibly alter the destiny of this ancient classical civilization for the worst. Oh my God, I must say. All the Tamil movies that we saw, thanks to the Dravidian scriptwriters, they would show one Rajguru, who would be one evil character, and he'll be controlling the kingdom. And no such thing was, when I read the history books and everything else, there was nobody like that. What happened to the knowledge of Chanakya? What happened to the advice of Chanakya? I've always wondered mentally, but Sandeep has written about that. The chief reason for the repeated pounding that the Arab Muslim armies received in India owes to the incredibly sturdy and enduring foundations of the Sanatanic, Dharmic state and military organization that sustained the might of the Hindu kingdoms. This well-oiled military organizational superstructure, with its subterranean links of loyal coordination, down to the last village hitman who was responsible for maintaining his own army, was a direct inheritance from the time of Chandragupta Maurya. This brilliant and far-sighted vision emanating from the genius of Chanakya Kautilya was wisely and vigorously retained, extended and greatly improved by the Gupta Empire. In turn, the successors preserved the same. The significant but overlooked fact of Indian history becomes clearer when we contrast it with most other nations that encountered the armies of Islam during that period. It was the same story elsewhere. Large-scale massacres of Christians and other non-Muslims, industrial-scale plunder, mass conversions to Islam, slave-taking, desecration of their religious places. Killing, raping, looting, plundering, places which says how many camels carried the treasure, how many horses carried the treasure, what were the kind of gems, what happened to these idols. They were all broken and made into steps in a mosque or in several mosques. This is what was happening. And all these people were, kind of given a decent place in the history book once again. Or in all the history books, why only one book? And there are so many names and so many dates, references given by Sandeep, which shows that a lot of work has gone in before writing the book itself. He must have culled out all the information and made a chart of the information. So you can read it with and without the references. Either which way, it's a marvelous read. I must congratulate the author. The first battle of Tyrant and the second battle of Tyrant. We feel so sad. We feel like getting up and going and jumping into a time machine, so that you can tell Mr. Prithviraj Chauhan or Maharaja Dhiraj Prithviraj Chauhan that Your Royal Highness, please do not, be careful. This guy is here to finish you. And he did. Slave becomes the Sultan is the name of a chapter. A sultanate of Turkic slaves. Look at this paragraph. Karnadeva managed to escape even as Aibak marched towards Anahila Pataka. The same ghastly horror was repeated. Hindu and Jain temples were mercilessly demolished. Murtis were smashed to pieces. Homes were set ablaze. Palaces and ground mansions were plundered with impunity, and large-scale slave-taking ensued. Before leaving for Delhi, Aibak stationed a Muslim officer to take charge of this cindered excuse of a once grand city. But no sooner had Aibak left, Bhima too emerged from his hiding place and rode the Turksha officer, and over time ejected most of the Turks from Gujarat. For the next full century, no Muslim king from Delhi dared to venture into Gujarat. At least, they managed for some time. One more. A severe action ensued from dawn to midday when the army of idolatry and damnation turned its back in flight from the line of battle. Most of the leaders were taken prisoners, and nearly 50,000 infidels, that is Indian Hindus, were dispatched to the hell by the sword. And from the heaps of the slain, the hills and the plains became of one level. More than 20,000 slaves and 20 elephants and cattle and arms beyond all calculation fell into the hands of the victors. You would have thought that the treasures of the king of all the inhabited world had come into their possession. Terrible. It's like frightening. 50,000 people. There are so many times 50,000 people have been killed, 20,000 people have been killed, and we are talking of so many pogroms in the 20th, 21st century, and the population was much lesser. Somnath, Ganguly describes vividly. The Somnatha Temple stood on huge blocks of stone. Its roof was supported by 56 wooden pillars, curiously carved and set with precious stones. What a sight it must have been with all the lamps. The pyramidal roof was made of 13 stories and was surmounted by 14 golden domes. The girth of the linga was 4 feet by 6 inches, and its height from above the base 7 feet and 6 inches. A portion 6 feet in height was hidden underneath. Adjacent to it, under its pedestal, there was the treasury containing many gold and silver miniature idols. In front of the chamber, there was a chain of gold, 200 mans. One man is 40 kilos. 200 into 40 is 8 tons. A chain of gold. In weight, attached to a bell which was rung by shaking the chain from time to time. 1,000 Brahmins were appointed. 350 people were singing and dancing. Income from 10,000 villages. All this destroyed. The first step was to slaughter this crowd of panicked, desperate, and crestfallen Hindus. The large bands of people were waiting inside the sprawling temple, praying to their Ishta Devata, the centuries-old sacred Jyotirlinga, for courage, searched out and charged against. Batch after batch of such Hindus were pitilessly massacred. The total estimate runs to about 50,000. Those who attempted to escape were doggedly hunted down and slaughtered. The image was destroyed by Prince Mohammed. He ordered the upper part to be broken and the remainder to be transported to his residence with all its coverings and trappings of gold, jewels, and embroidered garments. Part of it has been thrown into the hippodrome of the town together with the Chakraswamin, an idol of bronze that had been brought from Tanishir. Another part of the idol from Somnath lies before the door of the mosque of Ghazni, on which people rub their feet to clean them from the dirt and wet. Deadly. He ordered 2 pieces of the idol to be broken off and sent to Ghazni, so that one might be thrown at the threshold of the public mosque and the other at the court door of his own palace. These identical fragments are to this day to be seen in Ghazni. 2 more fragments were reserved to be sent to Mecca and Medina. The next blow broke open the belly of Somnath, which was hollow, and discovered a quantity of diamonds, rubies, and pearls. Terrible. When we look at all these things, it is, really, it aches us. It aches our heart. As we are talking, Mr. Sandeep, 2 people have bought this book. They've sent messages. It is online now. I want to ask you this question, sir. Why did you choose to take this topic? And how did you go about your research? All of us are curious.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for inviting me. You pretty much read out directly from the book, so I think that's a good thing. But I'm happy to be here. As to why I chose this topic, it's hard to explain why an author chooses something. But in general, I think I've mentioned parts of it in the introduction to the book. Most of the works on Muslim Islamic history in India or Islamic rule in India, it pretty much covers, the bulk of the literature on this subject is mostly about the Mughal period. And the pre-Mughal period, what happened, there was about 300 or 320 years.
334 years.
320 plus years is the total, period of the pre-Mughal history of Muslim history of India. So, as far as in the limited scope of my reading, there is no one comprehensive volume or multiple volumes that covers this period in its entirety. In order to understand the foundations of Mughal rule in India, this period has to be understood first. What is commonly known as Delhi Sultanate. So that period, that 3 century period history has to be understood, for to better understand what followed. It might surprise a lot of people when I say today that for all its exaggerated accounts of histories written of the Mughal Empire, it lasted for about 157 years, from Akbar to Aurangzeb. And even these 150 years, there were only flashes of brilliance and things like that. Apart from that, it is as bad or even worse as the history of the Delhi Sultanate. But because there's no one place where you could find all this history, I thought this is a good place to begin with. So if that answers your question.
So will you be, so your volumes will continue and it will go travel into the entire Mughal history, hopefully?
No, not Mughal. It'll end where the Mughal history begins. It'll end with the invasion of Babur.
So you're from 713, you're coming until 1526 then?
1526, more or less, yeah.
More or less. Now I think you stopped at the Khilji coming in.
Stopped at the death or demise of Balabal.
Correct. About 1287 or so. I think Jalaluddin Khilji comes inside, then Alauddin Khilji comes inside.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the other sultans also coming in till Ibrahim Lodi.
Like I said, till the dawn of till the advent of Babur.
True. One thing which I found in common with all these people was that in no way can you trust them to be calm, composed, and quiet, or forgiving, or accommodative. If anybody makes that mistake, you had it. I suppose Chhatrapati Shivaji was the first Indian to understand that properly.
Yeah, in a common way, the first major king was Chhatrapati Shivaji. But if you read the initial, the history of his initial rise to power, this understanding had not dawned upon him in the way it did after his return from Agra.
Correct. Yeah. I agree with you, because he was making peace with often making peace with either the Central Indian Shia Sultanates or the monsters at Delhi.
Yeah.
to use that word, nothing else that you can describe them.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Monsters. What else can we describe a person like Aurangzeb?
Yeah. Monsters. There's no other way to describe them.
And rightfully, like what you said, till the death of Humayun, the first 30 years of the Mughal rule is like very indifferent, and you don't know, there was a lot of chaos.
Yeah.
And even in Akbar, he took a good 25 years of his rule, I think, almost to get rid of Jazia.
Yes.
First 25 years, Jazia was there.
No. First 25 years of Akbar rule was not covered in glory at all.
It was gory.
It was gory.
Because when we look at the manner in which he dealt with some of his own generals, how he dealt with a person called Bairam Khan. Bairam Khan had killed Tardi Beg.
Yeah.
And then and Bairam Khan finally was neutralized. Then Adam Khan. When we look at the stories of all those people, Akbar was like whimsical. If his mood was all right, it was fine.
Yes.
And then when we come into the era of Jahangir, we can start seeing him destroying the Varaswamy temple at Pushkar.
Yes.
Because that was a hunting lodge.
Yeah.
And Pushkar was for them, in Islam, I think pigs are not acceptable. Yeah. So they broke the Varaswamy temple straight, one shot, over. Just because he didn't have a beard, you cannot say that he was not a fanatic.
Yeah.
You're clean-shaven fanatic.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Shah Jahan, all of us, whatever that we know of,
Mm.
was consolidating. And the manner in which each one of them finished their brothers, nephews, putting
Mm.
their fathers in jail or slow poisoning them,
Mm.
all of it was terrible. Looking at Balban only, looking at Sultana Razia,
Mm.
I've read a little about, I remember the famous movie
Mm.
starring Hema Malini, I think. Those
Mm.
days, it had cost a whopping 12 crores.
Yes.
I
Yes.
wanted to see the movie, but I somehow never saw it. So, the daughter of Iltutmish.
Mm.
And as a child, I'd been to Delhi, and now after reading your book, I
Mm.
feel, going to Qutub Minar is a moment of sorrow, not a moment of joy.
Yes.
Whole scale destruction of everything that was around to put up this tall structure, which could possibly be carrying parts
Mm.
of temples. And I can definitely say Indians as a civilization have been extremely tolerant, very forgiving, very noble. They believed in dharma, karma, and satya, and has stood them in through tough times. But we have to think of all this rightfully, Mr. Sandeep, because today we have come into a situation wherein there is suddenly I feel that the Indic culture and civilization is getting stifled once again.
Mm.
I mean, we feel that they start attacking some small practice, some small ritual, and
Mm.
make a mountain out of a molehill.
Mm.
But while there are others who are completely dictated by the clergy, the other Abrahamic religions are completely dictated by the clergy in India. They don't have an independent say at all. And we don't have any clergy dictating our ways. Even the various pontiffs, they are pontiffs when they come, we pay our respects to them. They go back, we continue with our life. There's no major guidance like you sleep like this, you get up like this, you pray like this. Of course, there are very small number of people are following that. But nevertheless, in the heart, everybody is a nice and fine, marvelous Hindu.
Mm.
But we have to be aware, looking at the threats today. This book is an invaluable asset to the desk of every household. Suppose you feel that eternal vigilance is the price of peace. To cut short my statement, if you read this book, you will be vigilant. You will be careful. Oh, Mr. Sandeep Balakrishna has written this book. He's not spun a fine yarn, but he's got references. He's giving you references from their own writers, their own authors, their own chroniclers, and the kind of pride that they take. Heaps of skulls, rivers of blood, laceration, cutting, chopping, as though I think there's no way that we can if a movie was made like this, based on what these guys have done, the censor board will not let it to be released. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sandeep ji.
You're absolutely right.
Will they release if we show 50,000 people being chopped in front of Somnath?
Mm.
Central Board of Film Censors, do you think will they leave us?
No, there is no filmmaker who has the guts to make such a film. You don't go so far as a censor board. Show me one
Oh, yeah,
film.
first of all, that's why I wanted to know. You at least appreciate an author like you who's had the courage to write about it. And talking about Multan, the statue of the sun god, Aditya and Multan with two big ruby eyes. I believe those guys you have mentioned that they'll just take it out and say, we'll break the statue if you come any further. And our armies came back.
Mm. Yes.
And finally, they broke the statue. They destroyed the city. I feel sad for the descendants of those people who were killed and converted.
Yeah.
I wonder what kind of a paradise that they're living in.
Mm.
You're talking so many things connected with, caste kind of things. We never had slavery and no such butchering also. And even if this issue itself is so bad for us in front of our eyes.
Mm.
Imagine if something like that. And how is it that our education ministers who came inside post-independence, managed to, let this off the books. Let this off. This is a big scandal. A scandal in the making was perhaps taking place.
Mm.
I think the first education minister was Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's the one.
He's the one. He was there for some years, maybe 10, 12 years, and there are others also.
Mm.
And I think it was, they just washed everything and kept.
Mm.
And I'm glad that in the state of Karnataka, looking at the work that you're doing, there's a lot of dharmic work going on.
Mm.
Maybe you still feel this is not enough, I don't know. But much better and, much in greater quality than in Tamil Nadu, wherever I'm hailing from.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that so many of you, I think many of the authors are ensconced in and around Bangalore and Mysore only.
Yeah.
Whenever I spoke with each one, they say I'm in Bangalore, I'm here, I'm there.
Yeah.
All of you. Bangalore is a big, center. Amrita Mandan.
Yeah.
Like Saint Vadiraja says, the churning takes place and Mahalakshmi comes out. I think we need the Dairya Lakshmi. Maybe that is very important. And the Dairya Lakshmi, I hope it dawns upon our people. So the next book, how many books are there totally, Sandeep, in this?
Well, let's see. I don't have a definite plan. Let it keep coming out. So when it comes out, you'll know.
I think you'll need 2 more books, definitely.
Maybe.
Surely.
Yeah,
Because when you look at the Kalji itself, the Kalji itself will require 1 book by itself. And the others will require the 3rd one.
Yeah.
Because out of these, the complete obliteration and conquest and stamping out of so many things was done by Malik Kafur and Alauddin Khilji.
Yeah.
Of course, to be followed by Ulu Khan, who was none other than Muhammad bin Tughlaq, I think. So I think you'll need 1 or 2 books to cover between 1300 and 1340. That period itself will require 2 books, perhaps. We are aware in Tamil Nadu, the state of Tamil Nadu lost its military potency by 1327 completely. That's all. After that, the Vijayanagar kingdom had to come. Those people had to throw out the Madurai Sultanate that you know. Kumara Kampanna, 1371, 1374, all the battles. And then the Nayaks of Vijayanagar kingdom, Nayaks of Madurai, Udayars of Mysore, it just went off into the European hands. So the state of Tamil Nadu has never had a so-called sovereign monarch independently who he or she could stand on their own with the dynasty. It was over by about 1327, maybe even about 1311, 12. The Pandyas were just a pale shadow of what they were between 1311 and 1327. So I'm eager. Maybe I should get that book and read because I want to understand. I went to Madurai about 10 years ago and I've seen the Shiva Lingam which was broken by the army of Malik Kafur. I wanted to take a photograph of that. The temple official prevented me from taking a picture.
Okay.
I asked him why. He said, no, if you take this picture, some problems will happen if this picture is taken out. I said, what kind of problems? No, people will become very unhappy. It could cause some other communal issue. I said, no, why? Does it mean that, we take this out and show people are going to hack each other? Definitely not. There's a thing called we have reconciled. But we want to know and we want to be careful in the future to take care of a culture and civilization so that no one should ever think of doing this once again. That's all. Let peace be with everybody. I've seen that Shiva Lingam, which was damaged. I'm sure you must have seen it too.
No, I've not seen. I've not been to Madurai so far.
You please go to the Madurai Meenakshi temple. The Shiva Lingam is there. Suddenly you'll notice that it is a damaged Shiva Lingam. Please come. I'll come with you.
Okay.
We'll go to Madurai.
Very kind of you.
We'll do a small tour. You can see the Meenakshi temple, Alagar temple also. Madurai is a lovely place.
Yeah,
Tamil
yeah,
Nadu is a temple state of the world. You're welcome.
yeah.
Please come, we'll go to Madurai. I'll
Mm,
take you to a place called Kolumam where you can see an inscription connected with Kumara Kampanna in 1368. That's
mm.
about nearly 100 kilometers from Coimbatore.
I've
Huge
read that.
Nataraja.
Yeah, yeah, I've read that.
Oh, you've read that? Okay. K villages. There
Mm.
are 7 Shiva temples.
Yes.
About 2 years back, I had an opportunity to visit
Mm,
all the K villages and see them.
mm,
So I'm
mm,
sure it is very enriching. You should definitely
mm,
visit. I'm going to get this book on the Madurai Sultanate and maybe have one more online.
mm,
People of Tamil Nadu should know,
mm.
and the people of India at large should know what has
Yes.
happened in the past, and let
Mm.
us not try to hide it and keep.
Yeah.
So with regard to social justice, have everyone been fair?
Mm.
They've been fair. This caste was treated like this, so and so was treated as an untouchable, so and so was not let into the sanctum.
Mm.
And you need reformation with regard to marriages.
Mm.
Registered marriage is sufficient. The
Mm.
Hindu Marriage Act and all was modified. When
Mm.
so all this can take place, right? Why
Mm.
should it not take place with somebody else? I just cannot understand.
Yeah. Mm. Right.
So please
Mm.
share some of your experiences connected with the research of the works that you've done. Some of
Mm.
these books. How do you manage to get the
Mm.
information, find the time, and
Mm.
get the churn it out properly? And get also such publishers like Bloomsbury to
Mm.
publish them.
Mm. No, there's no, I mean, there's nothing special, about the research that I did. It's pretty much any kind of the same methods that most authors and scholars follow. So there's nothing out of the way, nothing special I did. I didn't go under some rock or inside a cave, nothing like that. Usual research methodologies, whatever is there, I've followed faithfully. But like you pointed out, I like the primary sources to do the talking instead of relying on interpretations by other people. Let's read what they themselves have said about all these things. Then you'll form the
Perfect.
clearest, most truthful picture of the history as far as possible.
It
So
is
that's
not as far as possible. I can say you've done a very good job. And
thank
when
you.
we look at all these people, one
Hmm,
thing that I observed was they had a liking for these young lads. Many
hmm,
of these despotic dictators, I
hmm,
would use that word, these monarchs were cruel.
hmm,
They seem to have been besotted by some of these young lads who were
hmm.
looking good and taken them away separately
Yeah,
and
that
had a very carnal experience in life with all these people. And
no, no.
that's
Yeah, see, homosexuality, pedophilia, especially with young boys, forget, young girls. Homosexuality, pedophilia has been a central feature of all this, Muslim history, not just in India, but, throughout the world, wherever they went and conquered. This has been par for the course.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Par
This
for
is
the course is the most
par for,
appropriate term.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, when they say he was his favorite slave or something, I mean, it is left to anybody's imagination what that really means, the full extent of that.
Even when we look at even some of the chronicles connected with Babur, we find
Yeah.
a
No,
guy teacher.
forget Babur. When Akbar was, just barely in his teenage, he would be, raped by all these bad guys and, all these barbarians in Afghanistan. He
Akbar
was in
himself.
Afghanistan. He'd been there with Bayram Khan, in a kind of a semi-exile, saving,
Correct, correct, correct.
yeah, desperate to hide and save his life. So all the warlords in and around that area, he was fair game for them. And the running joke in all those days was that Akbar was, always careful about watching his back. Back is a euphemism for what?
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, there's a documentary
there are plenty of.
mention of all this.
Yeah, they mention all this very frankly, as a matter of fact fashion. They mention all these chronicles. They look. One thing you have to give them credit for is their candor. They make no bones, they make no apologies for all this. In fact, they celebrate this kind of behavior. It's a matter of pride. How many young boys you have in your harem, or things like that. That's a matter of pride.
Oh, I for one remember in my ninth standard we had Mughal history, and during the quarterly examination, our history teacher, history miss, that's how all of us called the teacher then, said whoever comes up with 100 questions, I'll give you marks, 10 marks for the internals. So, I sat down with those days Vidyadhar Mahajan's book, Mughal history in India. So I took that out so that I could get more questions. So instead of 100, I prepared 701 questions and 701 answers, all one-line answers, in which I found that there were 5,000 women in Akbar's harem and 800 in Jahangir's harem. So I had made, how many women were found in Akbar's harem? There were 5,000 women in his harem. How many in Jahangir's harem? 800. What does Noor Jahan mean? Light of the world. Finally, you're so besotted by this woman, you call her light of the world. And then what was her earlier name? Noor Mahal, light of the palace. So he found that was not bright enough, so he made her Noor Jahan. And she controlled him. And their issue with Mahabat Khan, who tried to imprison them in Kashmir. For 100 days, there was no Mughal Empire. No one talks about that when he was surrounded and somehow they managed to pull the emperor out and his addiction to opium. How he blinded his own son, Prince Khusru, in 606 AD. And all this is pretty, shocking. The golden age of Mughals, Mughals Taj, you go to, I think, Mughal Sheraton, a nice 5-star hotel is named after them. I think in Agra, I've been there. But when you look at all these barbaric activities, you can't have as pieces of art inside. No one will come there. People get frightened and run away. So it's like they used, I think, everything within their means to bring out the maximum level of cruelty. As much as possible. I think nothing could have been more than this. I'm glad that all of you are at least coming out and talking about it openly. I did not know that Akbar was attracting other men. I remember reading about his uncles Kamran, Hindal, Askari, and how on one day I think Kamran tried to expose Akbar to the guns of his own father. In one battle, because Akbar was found in one of the forts belonging to the uncles. Now I can imagine what could have happened to the young Prince Akbar.
So there you go.
Deadly. I'm grateful to you for giving this information.
Thank you.
People would like to, watch this and learn more about this. I'm sure even Mughal history has to be written in the real perspective and shared. All this is missing. When we read, you look at Akbar as one lonely child who was completely under the care of his uncles and his father. And Hamida Banu Begum, Mahamanga comes, the witness, they looked after him so well. And then Tardi Beg was killed by Bayram Khan, he was the bad fellow. Everybody is made a bad fellow. Then finally he kills Adam Khan, everyone is finished, and he comes and sits down. And to go for a hunt, 50,000 soldiers. You form a big ring for several kilometers, shrink the ring with drummers and everybody. Finally the emperor will take a shot and kill. And the story is connected to Birbal. Birbal was killed in 1586. And where does he meet Prince Khurram, who was born in 1592? But all the books have details connected with that. I think all that can be demolished by authors like you. And please continue with your writing, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So anytime you're welcome to Coimbatore to
Hmm.
meet your readers and the audience.
Hmm.
And also welcome to visit all these spots in Tamil
Hmm.
Nadu, particularly the city of Madurai, which bore the maximum brunt. And then, of
Yes.
course, Srirangam too.
Hmm.
You visit the place around Srirangam where 12,000 people were butchered in a single day.
Srirangam. Yeah.
So you've been there.
Hmm.
Very good.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Most
And
welcome. Thanks for
and
inviting me.
and we'd like to,
Hmm.
meet Sri S.L. Bhairappa along with you one day.
Hmm. Hopefully, let's see. Yeah, let's see.
Thank you so much for
Most
being
welcome.
with us.
for having me. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Good day to
Yeah.
you. Thank you, sir.
Namaste. Thanks.
Namaste.
Namaste. Hari Om.
Hari Om.